I'm talking over Zoom today with Darin Scott. He's a director, writer, and actor, and the man behind a recently released film called The Oath, which is an independently produced film inspired by the Book of Mormon. Darin, thanks for taking a few minutes to chat with me about this today.
Hey, very welcome, Rhett. Thanks for reaching out. Appreciate that.
The Oath, it hit theaters in December, and it was kind of, I mean, it was nationwide, but it was just a limited amount of theaters, from my understanding. And now you're pushing really hard for, sales of DVD sales and Blu-ray sales. Uh, First of all, what is your reaction to how this film has done over the last 6, 7 months?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think every filmmaker wants a hit, right? I think that's what every filmmaker wants, and we're hoping for that, for the same, for the amount of sacrifice that went into it. Not just from me and my family, but we had 68 investors, who really sacrificed to be a part of the project. Really any investor that invests in film is sacrificing because films are they're very speculative. It's a very it's kind of a brutal industry that way. And so you hope that you have some success. And overall, I think the general overarching feeling is we're thrilled with the film we made, and in general, the audience reception has been very well received as far as an 86% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, 500 plus reviews. You can go to other places, obviously. You can go to IMDb, and we have 3.5 stars. It's getting beat to heck over there. But the thing with reviews and IMDb in particular, there's no rite of passage. You can literally go on and just mark it 1 star. You haven't seen it. There's no verification. And so, but that's the age we live in, is just reviews. And everyone's just it's almost like for every person that loved the film, there's two that hated it, that they'll spend the time. I mean, when's the last time you reviewed a movie? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most people, even when you see a good movie, you don't usually, like, I just saw Fall Guy, for example. It's one of my wife and I's new favorite movies, which, I mean, flopped at the box office when you consider its budget and everything else, even though it made, over 100 million, but the budget was 125, I think 150 million, something like that. And so you have this like phenomenal movie, really well done, and it flops. And it's like, it's one of our favorite movies. But even I didn't go online and go, hey, this is the best movie ever. I told people about it, but it takes a special kind of person when they don't like something to go online and try to like evangelize and make sure everyone else knows how much they hated it. It's a real vicious world that we live in that way. Uh,
Yes.
and I would just say, as far as the success of the film, if you have to kind of cut that down and start saying, okay, what are we talking about with success? Financially, it was not as of yet a success, and that's unfortunate because it's I mean, the quality, and I'm not just talking about like, well, I directed, I did all this stuff. I'm talking about the people that we gathered together to make this movie. One of the proudest things I have about this film is the score. It's written by Trevor Morris, and he made immense sacrifices to be a part of this movie. He is not part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For someone like him to come onto a movie like this and just bleed it out, he gave us everything. And I think that his score is Oscar worthy. It's a custom score. It's sweeping. It's epic. It's amazing. He's a 2-time Emmy winner. So the quality of this film, instantly, as soon as you start watching it, you're watching a quality movie. It's just there. So we're thrilled with that part of it. And unfortunately, in the world we live in, that doesn't matter as much anymore. It's all about, who you can get to write you a good review, and you usually paying them under the table to give you some good reviews and get out of the gates. We knew right off the bat that The Oath was going to be controversial. We knew that from the very beginning.
Now, I wasn't going to do this, but you've kind of implied this, so I wanted to mention it because we're talking about the film's performance. And you
Yeah,
implied that in terms of financial numbers, people might consider it a big flop.
yeah, sure.
I understand. So the numbers that I saw online that it's total gross was a little over $500,000
Correct.
with a budget of 24 million. Is that accurate?
That's very inaccurate. We have not gone public with the budget, and I don't know. Maybe if I write that book I'm talking about, I'll
Okay.
I'll spill the beans.
I got that number off of one of those comment threads, So
Yeah, you can go. There's a bunch of Reddit threads that are just scorning it to heck, and there's all sorts of just the rumors are unbelievable. 24 million, no. I mean, I'll ask you, how much do you think it cost?
I would guess, I mean, keep in mind this is an independent film, so all of the
Sure.
financing is stuff you had to raise yourself or get from investors or
Yeah.
so I would say several $1 million,
Yeah, that's accurate.
like 3 or 4 million.
Yeah. I would say, without confirming, that's the exact number. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, I mean, for an independent film, it did quite well, considering. I mean, half a
Well,
million
yeah,
dollars.
sure. I mean, it's always a question of like, what's the budget and what'd you bring back? And people don't know, most people don't know that the theaters take half of the money. So when you say, 500,000 or 1 million, they're taking half of that. So we don't even see half of that, and then your distributor takes whatever percentage they're taking out of what's remaining. So yeah, it didn't do like $100,000. That would have been really embarrassing. But 500,000 is very low. I mean, I don't. I like to try to have thick skin that way. I know what it is. I also know that. I also know for a fact that when that happens, it's generally always the knee jerk that, oh, the movie was horrible. It's actually totally untrue. You have movies that are absolutely horrible or that just aren't very good, and they just just explode. Everything from timing of the market, when it happened, to who got behind it. It's just, there's so many variables, and I could name like Wizard of Oz or It's a Wonderful Life. All those flopped when they came out. They came cult classics later. Beloved classics long after. Willy Wonka, for example. There's so many films that did not do well initially. Even Braveheart, for crying out loud, was before they were really doing foreign sales. Foreign sales revolutionized the market because all of a sudden they could get additional money outside of the domestic box office, and it just really opened things up. And then you can start funding movies through foreign distribution. You can actually make the movie with the foreign pre-sales. It's nuts. So that really opened the door. And Braveheart came really right when that was happening, and it still wasn't out. So if you look at Braveheart, what, $80 million budget, and it made like 75, 80 at the box office, that was technically a flop.
Yeah.
There were 50 million in the hole, and that doesn't include the marketing, which they probably spent another 40 or 50 in marketing. And then it goes out on Blu-ray, DVD, and at that time that was the thing,
Right.
And then it really blew up, and football teams are chanting Braveheart themes, freedom, and it became really a cult hit after that. So anyway, with that perspective, that's part of the challenge, is that I know, and 86% of the audience knows that the film was good. But how do you explain that without sounding like the guy that's trying to tell everybody their film's good when it didn't do well at the box office? It's a hard thing to do, but it is the reality. We're very happy with the film we have, as far as from a script writing perspective, of character arcs and everything that's happening. It's all there.
Yeah.
So we're happy with that. We're very, very unhappy with how, the ultimate box office went. But that is one of the challenges of filmmaking, and one of the things you can't predict.
Let's put this film in context a little bit more for people who might be unfamiliar with it.
Sure.
So I just want to touch on, the film focuses on the latter part of the Book of Mormon. Like for members of the church, they'd be familiar with the Book of Moroni in the Book of Mormon, which is the very last book. It focuses on Moroni's life And there's some elements that are introduced into the story that are a little bit of creative liberties. It's hard to follow the book exactly when there's so little information that's available. But the cast, there's yourself. You were director, writer, the lead role, and then one of the villain in the movie is Billy Zane, which moviegoers might be familiar with. He was in Titanic and The Phantom, and so he's a well-known name. I wanted to talk about the cast first of all, like yourself. You were the director of this movie and the leading person trying to bring this movie to the screen, and you weren't like you didn't initially want yourself in the lead role. You wanted another actor.
Yeah,
You speak to that. How much can you say about like who you offered the role to, or and those kind of things?
I think it's generally safer to, well, I'll just answer it and see how it comes out. I generally try not to name names, just to steer clear of that kind of thing. Because then, they say, "Hey, you told me, you said in this podcast that yeah." But let's just answer it this way: that I didn't plan, even in the pilot film, which I also played Morona in the pilot film, and that wasn't planned. Essentially, the exact same thing happened in the feature. We basically, I made offers to several actors for the pilot film, and ultimately we had to make a decision because we were having custom armor made by FBFX Studio in London, who did Troy and Gladiator and very expensive armor. And I literally had a body scan done. I had to have a body scan done, had them time to do that. And so it kind of came to the point where, all right, well, we've got to decide. So I kind of fell into the role in the pilot film. And then, that was a 3-day shoot, so it wasn't terribly intimidating. And now we're doing the feature, which was crazy fast. We filmed it in 21 days on location, mostly in upstate New York, and also the opening running stuff was in the northern Oregon coast. So a lot more intimidating as far as like the amount of time that I had to play all of those roles. But the same thing happened with the feature. We had a post on Breakdown Services, which goes out to, basically all the agents. And we brought in virtually, most things are virtual nowadays. So we virtually auditioned. I think there was like 1,600 submissions. We virtually auditioned like maybe 50 of them. And then we virtually called back like 10. And ultimately it just came down to, I guess I'm making the casting decision. So it's obvious, it's very easy for someone to say, well, the vested interest was that I decided that none of them were any good. But the fact is, like, I've cast over 30 commercials. I've done probably 5 short films. This is my directorial feature debut. But I have a lot of experience casting my own stuff. I cast my own stuff all the time. And I have only one other time besides the pilot film cast myself in a commercial once. I've always cast somebody else. And I have a very good sense of who's going to float the boat in a casting session. And that's why I like to direct cast. Now, in a bigger scene set when you have like, 40 cast members, then you're going to hire a casting director. And we did have a casting director for some of the extra roles, but I direct cast most of this. And at the end of the day, watching all those, they were just so far from, they just weren't even close. And while we're doing that, we were also making offers to several A-list actors, and some of them A-, some of them B+. We were sending it out and making pretty substantial offers, actually. Some of them I couldn't believe they turned it down or didn't get back to us. And that's one of the challenges when you're working with Hollywood agents is, they have a fiduciary to send it, but they really have no fiduciary to push it. And so they'll send it, but you never know. A lot of times there were, of probably a dozen of these high-end actors, maybe 3 of them actually responded. And that's very typical. And when they do respond, you've already cast it like 2 months ago. They're like, yeah, we went ahead and we're going to pass on this. And it's like, well, good thing, because I cast it like 2 months ago, you know? So, and it's a different, it's just a whole nother animal of casting, but we offered it to many actors. Some of them I was very surprised they turned it down. And ultimately I just basically kind of had a, you know, had a prayer. And it was like, look, if this actor accepts tomorrow, which is basically our last option, offer that was outstanding. And I said, if he accepts, you know, I'm gonna be thrilled. It's gonna be great. It's a name that you would recognize. He's been in Twilight. He's been in some big movies. And he turned it down. So I basically said, if he turns it down, that'll be my answer. And the other thing in question was that we were repurposing the armor from the pilot film for the feature. And guess what? That was already molded to my body. So it just made sense. I'm like, all right, we use the same armor. And we made that decision literally, I think, 2 weeks before principal photography.
Wow.
So it was yeah. And of course, you know, I knew the character. I've been reading this guy since I was in high school. And I knew the source material back and forward. So it just made sense. Like, we had to move very fast. I would have had to explain this to an actor, get inside the head and go, hey, this is what's going on. And I didn't have to do any of that. I just knew.
Why did you want to tell this particular story in the Book of Mormon?
It was never, we had never intended to make the oath. It happened because, you know, after 13 years of trying to raise a substantial amount of funds for a big war film, we had to shift gears and say, okay, well, we've raised this much. What can we make for what we have? And the oath was the answer. And so we intended initially to focus on Captain Moroni, which is in the middle of the Book of Mormon, and like 73 BC, and kind of introduce it with, you know, three big battles in a movie, which would have been epic, but extremely expensive to do right. You know, you always have the option to try to do it and have it look ridiculous, or to do something much smaller and have it look good. So we decided to bite off less and focus on Moroni the second, Mormon's son, at the end of the book, which, you know, is a lone survivor, a story of redemption. It's a story of, you know, transcendent mission that he had to fulfill, and burying this ancient record so that it could come forth in the latter time. And so it kind of, you could see how that could be done at a much lower budget, because you're focusing on a lone man, and then, you know, a skirmish with a small battle at the end. But the cast is relatively very small.
I wanted to ask you about the industry a little bit. So about a month ago, I interviewed a man named Richard Dutcher. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a name familiar to you.
I know who that is. Yeah.
He directed God's Army, which was kind of the first commercial film that introduced a commercial market of filmmaking that's been dubbed Mormon cinema, or LDS.
Sure. Yeah.
It was like the first LDS based movie that was on the big screen, and
Mhm.
kind of opened this market for filmmakers like yourself to make Latter-day Saint based stories.
Yeah.
And we talked extensively about his opinions on that market and how he feels it's gone. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, is the LDS film market, is it good, bad? Like, how do you feel it's evolved over the years? You know, and what's your take on the quality of films in that particular genre?
Latter-day Saint themed films have the same general challenge and frequent issues as does, you know, Christian films in general. And that is that you have a tendency to kind of preach to the choir. And that happens, of course, in Latter-day Saint cinema, kind of ad nauseum, where they're basically like making a film about themselves with inside jokes that only they get. And there's a market for it. They will buy it, and they will patronize it and go see it. So those are the films that continue to get made. And candidly, you know, anyone who really pushes that line and tries to go outside of that with a Latter-day Saint themed movie, if you look back in history, they've generally been pretty punished for doing so. Which is it's a real tragedy, because the stories are really wonderful. You know, whether you're Latter-day Saint or not, they're heroic, they're uplifting, they're heart-wrenching, they're inspiring. Yeah, there's just stories of great courage of men and women who lived in dishonorable times and maintained their honor. So you have, you know, someone, whether it's me or someone else, Mitch Davis, you know, Other Side of Heaven, you know, he's made a fair attempt at that many times. And, you know, unfortunately, his movies have not done well financially either. And it's a real tragedy, because they're some of the best movies about Latter-day Saint stories and doctrines and teachings. When you know you're going to make a movie about, let's say, the Book of Mormon, you just have to understand the playing field, and you know that you're going to get massive resistance. And unfortunately, a lot of that resistance came from within our own people,
Right.
which is actually a terrible example. I mean, we had people working on this film, most of which were not members of the church, and they would observe this behavior from people within our faith, and they would just shake their heads. They're like, I have never seen this kind of behavior, because they don't understand policies and stuff like that. None of that matters to these people. They just see, oh, they don't support each other, and it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And I was the one person in between that I had to explain this to, you know, the Jews working on our campaign. They're like, you know, Jews stick behind each other. We've never seen that. Christians stick behind each other. We've never seen this kind of behavior. And I'm like, me neither, you know, and I'm trying to explain it, but it's indefensible. There really is a lack of maturity that has occurred within all faiths, really.
13 years of your life invested in this project.
Yeah.
So what's next for you now? Like, do you have another project that you're in the beginning stages of, or?
Yeah, I'm an actor, so I'm always auditioning for stuff. I just auditioned for a Costner movie called Horizon, and they postponed the part until September. So I don't know if I'll get that one until September, but I'm hoping I get it. I worked with Costner on Yellowstone, and so hopefully I get that one again, or get another job with him. And you know, I'm always, I mean, that's the life of an actor, is you're always auditioning for stuff, and, you know, being seen for stuff. So that's always going. I don't have, you know, anything set in stone as my next project that I'm producing, although I will say that I'm currently reading a book that the rights are available to, and it's a very good book. It's a Western, it's a love story Western film that's it's not one of those massive multi-million-dollar sale hits, but sold almost 1 million copy, probably 1 million by now. And I think it's a sleeper hit. It's a very, very beloved book. And so I'm reading that right now, and we'll see where that goes. You know, I might be raising funds for that. So anyway, nothing to do with it actually has Christianity in it. It's got biblical stuff, but it's more of kind of from the outside of someone observing that a family has a religious upbringing kind of thing.
I see. Okay.
And it has some fun jokes about Mormons in there too, having multiple wives. It's funny.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, the classic joke. But yeah, so that's kind of in the way right now. And I have lots of other stuff I do outside of movies too. So I do a lot of stuff. I try to keep the portfolio diverse.
Well, Darin, I appreciate it. The Oath is you sell it directly from the website?
Oathmovie.com.
Oathmovie.com.
And yeah, if you're editing this, put that up on the screen. Oathmovie.com. And basically, if you go to Blu-ray DVD, you can buy a physical copy. You can buy them in bulk and save, you know, gobs of money that way and share them. We recommend that. Even if you do want to watch it digitally too, we recommend that. And then on the watch page, that's where all the platforms are listed. We're on, you know, Xbox, Vudu, basically all the major platforms, Amazon. We recommend Apple TV again, because if you're going to do digital, because you can get the hour of extras and you can get 4K. Actually, that's the only place you can get 4K, because Blu-ray is basically 2K. So the Blu-ray is the other way to get the hour of extras and a 2K version, which is honestly, it's higher quality than most streaming, because you know, when they stream, they have to dumb it down significantly to go over the internet. You know, these are like 100, you know, 700 gigabyte files, you know, and when you're watching it online, it's only like a 10 gigabyte file. So you can see how it's like a lot of compression. So you pop in a Blu-ray, you'll see the difference, you'll hear the difference. But anyway, yeah, that's where they can get it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Darin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for you know, sticking it out and you know, appreciate you having me on.